As I say, my name's Mark. I work for Building Communities Trust as the Communications and Events Officer. And I'd like to welcome you today to this event on community buildings, which is aiming to look at how we can reduce building related costs in a time of increasing prices and also learn from others who have done similar things. So we'll run through the event guidelines. The event is being recorded. If there's an issue, let me know. It will be put up on YouTube. The likely audience eventually is going to be other Invest local areas and anyone who is interested in this area of work. But if there are any issues, let me know. As ever, if you're on Zoom, if possible, and you can stay muted, that would be great while you're not speaking, as otherwise it can cause a bit of interruption. And if you can put your camera on, that's also lovely so people can see your face. But again, I appreciate it is Monday morning and you may not want your camera on, so that's fine too. I just look great on a Monday, it's just a thing. If you can participate, do. Obviously, I appreciate, again, sometimes these things are happening while other things are happening in your work day, but it's great to have contributions and to hear people speak. If you haven't already, putting your organisation in your screen name helps people work out who you are and where you're from, which is nice, and it can help build links as well, and that's something that we're really keen on here. You'll see a few of us from BCT here, and there are lots of other organisations involved, so it's nice to be able to build those links. Be respectful of others' experiences and opinions, especially when we're in the breakout rooms. It's nice to hear from others and learn from each other. And finally, if there are any issues, look for someone with BCT in their screen name. Me, Larry, we're sort of in charge of running the event, but anyone with BCT in their screen name can help you out. So that's the guidelines. I'm not expecting a fire alarm. If there's a fire in your house, leave it. That's the other one, isn't it? I think, if we're in a shared space. A quick introduction as well. This event is also brought to you by Community Movement Cymru, which is a organisation aiming to support those who work for or operate in place-based community organisations, so a bit like Invest local areas, but other organisations like that. It's a broad network across the whole of the UK, the whole of Wales, sorry, aiming to influence and shape policies locally and nationally. And it will also have shared learning opportunities. Larry will put the link in the chat, I imagine, because she's probably already done it, which is ideal. But if you want to know more, there's me from BCT, also Gwen from BCT, before filling out the form. That's fine too. There's flyers and things. And so, yeah, it'd be interesting, or it'd be good if people could find out a bit more about that as it continues to build. Next up, we're looking at making sure that everyone is aware. I appreciate this event is about community buildings, but about how we can get financial support to individuals with the cost of living. So first up, there's the Wales Fuel Support Scheme, which is for eligible households who can claim a one-off payment of £200 from their local authority, and the money is to provide support with paying fuel bills, and it's in addition to to the winter fuel payment offered by the UK government. Larry looked it up this morning, and it seems that the deadline is tentatively the 28th of February. It doesn't say it on the Welsh Government website, but she checked 3, which I think is enough of a straw poll, local government websites, which all said the 28th. So yeah, if you do support anyone or work with organisations who support people, that was something that up till the new year was quite poorly taken up. So important to take it up. Next up, Welsh Water. They've got lots of help on their website with bills. They have social tariffs, which include, for those on benefits, reducing the amount that people pay, and also reductions in, if there's debts, reductions in the debts that are on there, and also things like water meter installation, which can make water rates cheap for people. So that's something else they do. And finally, the Discretionary Assistance Fund, they do the emergency assistance payments, which cover essential costs for those who are experiencing hardship. And again, that's support for those in real significant need. So Again, that's a Welsh Government scheme, and you can find out more on the website. Larry will have put stuff in the chat for each of those. So please, if you do support those who are in hardship, please direct them in the direction of those. We will share all the information at the end as well, in what I've heard other people refer to as a digital goodie bag. I don't think I should do that because I don't think it sounds great, but it will come out afterwards. Okay, so thank you for that. What we will do is just for the record, we did ask everyone if they wanted to talk in Welsh or English. Larry has written in Welsh in the chat box. We didn't reach the 10% threshold for requiring translation, so the speakers will be speaking in English, as will I, because unfortunately I am monolingual. So if there are any issues or you do require this translated into Welsh, please let me know, and we can look to do that and get the information sent out afterwards. So yeah, thank you for that, Larry, and again, all the links are in the chat if you need them. So up first, we have got Grant, who is joining us from an organisation called DEG. As you can see, they are Welsh language first, but fortunately Grant is going to talk to us in English, because otherwise I wouldn't understand anything. I guess I will introduce Grant and let him tell us a bit more about the organisation. Do I need to stop sharing before you share, Grant? Can you share? Yeah.
How's that? Can pawb yn gallu weld? Can everybody see?
Yes.
Up on the screen?
Can, yeah.
Great.
Thank
you. Diolch fawr iawn, Mark. Thank you, Mark. Bore da pawb. Sorry, dwi'n neud hwn I gyd trwy Saesneg, ond dwi'n hapus I unrhyw un gofyn cwestiwn neu unrhyw beth yn y Cymraeg. Hapus chi defnyddio iaith sy'n gweithio chi. I'm going to be going through this in English, as Mark just explained, but I'm happy for people to ask questions in whatever language you're happy with, but I only speak Welsh or English. So if it's Spanish or French, I may not be able to understand you, I'm afraid. Ond Cymraeg yn ideal. Diolch fawr. So we're based in Caernarfon as DEG, but I'm also part of some other organisations, including Teg and Newydd. Teg is a development organisation for community energy, based in South Wales mostly, but working all over Wales. And Newydd is a community energy organisation based in Flintshire in northeast Wales, that's looking to develop a large solar farm. And I'm also part of Menter Tynllan. I was one of the founders of Menter Tynllan, which has purchased a pub in my village here in Llandwrog, just 5 miles outside of Caernarfon. So I have an understanding both through my work with DEG, but also with Menter Tynllan on the needs to reduce costs in running community buildings. This is our beautiful pub. I just wanted to show you that because it's lovely, isn't it? And it looks even nicer now because we've just renovated the outside, fixed the roof and repointed it and painted the windows. They look all very pretty, much prettier than it does there. I should have walked up the road and taken a photo for you this morning. I wasn't capable of taking a photo on Saturday when I was there watching the rugby. It was very busy. That's Blygiad Egni Gwledig is DEG. As I suggested, we're based in Caernarfon, predominantly working in northwest Wales, helping communities to work together, mostly on energy, but also on climate change. And we have a vision where we imagine that our communities in northwest Wales will all work together and become vibrant places where everybody would love to live as we work on our way towards net zero. These are the places where we've worked in. We've helped nearly 150 communities now, predominantly on energy efficiency work. As you can see, we've started to drift east. We've been invited to head towards the east, and we've done more work with communities over there. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is based on our experience of working with all these communities and these buildings, types of buildings like this that you'd be familiar with from your communities, some old, some a bit newer, some big, some a bit smaller, all run by community organisations in different components, and therefore the information I give with you today is going to be based on a general approach to how buildings can cut down on their costs. And I'm going to talk really quick because I've been lazy and stolen a presentation I've given before, which goes for 30 minutes, but I've only got 20 minutes today. So I'm going to jump through lots of slides for you quite quickly. But the purpose of the slides really is to make sure you have the information afterwards. So these slides can be shared with you all afterwards. I hope Mark or Letty or the team at BCT are happy to share these around, and then you can read through them in your own time. So all our work is based on these two hierarchies. When we go out to see communities, based on the carbon management hierarchy and the energy efficiency hierarchy. So on the left here is the carbon management hierarchy, and you can see that it says the greatest place for us to save carbon is at the top of this inverted pyramid with efficiency measures. Below that, you would then have on-site renewable energy, which would help save carbon. Once you've done those two, you can start thinking about where do you buy your electricity from, whether you want to buy renewables or perhaps build your own larger renewable thing off-site somewhere. And finally, you might look to buy carbon offsets to get towards zero net emissions. On the right-hand side is the energy efficiency hierarchy. So this fits within that top section of the carbon management hierarchy. And here we always start with the fabric first of the building. What is the building made from? How is that insulated? How is it drafty or is it very airtight? Has it got good windows and doors? Those basics of the fabric is where we start with all our work on energy efficiency. And that helps us to reduce the heating demand in the building. We then move on to how you use energy more efficiently. And I'm going to go through much of that with you today. And finally, you look at where do you get your energy from? What type of energy is that? Can you use renewables? This is all the stuff I could talk to you about in a longer section. I'm going to run through most of this for you, but very quickly with information for you to take away and look at later. When we go and do an energy report, if you can see me as well, you know, an energy report like this, here's one we did on the pub when we're first looking at buying it, and it's like 20 odd pages long. These are the kind of headings that we work through. And it all starts with how do you monitor your use of energy at the minute? Is it just when the bill arrives, or do you take measures regularly? I recommend that you take measures regularly. Here, they're taken every fortnight, although you can only see points on a monthly basis at the bottom. And this gives you an opportunity to say, okay, how is our behaviour impacting on the energy use we have? So find where your meter is, take meter readings, set up a simple, look, I love spreadsheets, okay, so I'm a bit boring about it. This is actually my house, okay, this is how boring I am. I take these measures, even though I've got a smart meter, I still do it. And then I can get an idea of the direction our energy use is going. And I'm pleased to see that trend line in red dots is going down for our energy use. So you can do this, and then you should stick it up, you print it out in a graph, stick it up somewhere in the building where users and staff get to see that and let them understand that we're trying to reduce our energy use. And this drives some behaviour change for people to understand what difference they're making, because if you're not measuring it, you can't manage it. Hopefully that's the last cliche I got from doing my MBA that I'll repeat for you here today. Then we jump into the building fabric. So you've measured what you've got, the building fabric, the walls, the roof, your windows and doors. So walls can be insulated, either cavity wall insulation, external wall insulation, where you pop stuff on the outside, or internal wall insulation, again, where you get something like insulated plasterboards and you put on the inside of the building. All this stuff needs to be done by experts, and it needs to be done carefully to make sure it doesn't lead to further problems. So make sure you get a good person in to help you with that. In the roof, in loft insulation, we want to make sure you've got 300 millimeters of 30 centimeters of loft insulation in, and that's in good condition. And ensure that your windows and doors are double glazed where possible, where you can't. So our pub, Tin Llan, it's a listed building, so we can't have double glazing, but we can put in secondary glazing in there to ensure that it's more efficient. And we have all the work we've just done is to try and close up as many drafts as we can, so that we don't lose all the heat and then have to spend more money heating some more. Especially external doors and fire doors seem to be a nightmare in community buildings around Wales. There's always big gaps around them for some reason, and that just lets all the cold air in or the hot air out. So try and replace those. When you're looking at your insulation, you might find it looks like this on the left, this kind of rock wool kind of insulation, and you can see there's a gap there in the corner. That's bad news, because that allows cold air to come and meet the hot air, which forms condensation, which can lead to mold and eventually can lead to problems in the structure of the building. So you want to make sure it's all laid out neatly. You can see it in the loft space a bit better in the middle picture, and the right picture shows you how we would like it to look. So you would lay one lot in one direction between the beams, and then you'd lay another lot over the top, which they've not done in this picture here, in the opposite direction, so that we cover up the whole lot up to a good 300 millimeters of coverage for insulation. Okay, so what about a case study? Well, here's a case study of some work we've done in Bethesda with Partneriaeth Ogwen and Ynni Ogwen, based in Bethesda. And this is the community-run library there, where we helped them to get solar panels on the roof, funded by Ynni Ogwen, who own the hydro scheme in Bethesda. We actually helped them to put solar panels on 6 buildings there, and then we linked some of those solar panels to car charging. So you can see on the left here, Hugh Davis from Partneriaeth Ogwen, standing by their community electric vehicle that gets charged by the solar panels sitting on top of the library there, and community members that can use their community car to cut down on the carbon emissions from their transport. And you see we have a range of these community cars up here in the north. The one on the left is the one we have in Deg that's available for people to borrow in Carnarvon for £5.50 an hour, or a little less than £40 a day at the moment. This is then available for people who perhaps have cut down to one car in their household, or don't have access to a car, or quite often people who are thinking about getting an electric vehicle and want to test and drive it. And we use it for all sorts of community work. And then Partneriaeth Ogwen now have a range of vehicles. You can see in the right houses there, the second from the left as well. These are all ways of cutting down on our carbon emissions. So away from the case study and back to your building. Right, heating and hot water. That's your next area you want to look at. And this table here compares oil or gas to renewable forms of heating, such as an air source or a ground source heat pump, and also direct electric heating. The prices might vary a little bit now because this is starting to age in terms of the prices on here, but the fundamentals remain the same. That you'll see the heating system efficiency in the middle is far more efficient for heat pumps. So that means that you produce more heat for every unit of electricity you put in. So with a ground source heat pump, you put 1 unit of electricity in, you get 4 units of heat out on average. So that then reduces the price dramatically, as you see in the second from last column, that the effective heat price drops from, say, 28 pence with direct electric heating, where you just get 1 unit of heat for 1 unit of electricity, to ground source, where it then costs you about 7p for every unit of heat. There's information here about how an air source heat pump works, but I'm not going to spend time going through this too much with you today, except to say it's a bit like a fridge, but in reverse. You know, your fridge has got that stuff at the back where it takes the air and somehow it miraculously makes things inside your fridge cold. Well, an air source heat pump does the same thing in reverse. It takes the air from outside the property, it extracts the heat from that, it uses that heat to warm up water that it can then pump around your building. Very efficient, and these days pretty much as efficient as a ground source heat pump as well. So you don't need to have a lot of land to be able to use renewable heating. The next area of your building you might like to look at will be your lighting. This is easy stuff. This is stuff you could do yourself. So I showed you before the insulation in a loft. You could probably do that yourself as well, although it can be a bit irritating with some of that stuff that goes on. Lighting you can definitely do yourself, and it makes a big impact. Make sure every single light in your building is an LED. If it's not an LED, replace it, because no matter what it is, it will become cheaper. Don't wait for it to blow before you replace it. That's a false economy. You will save money the moment you put an LED light in on the running costs. Okay, the LEDs cost money to buy. So what we've done kindly for you here on the right-hand side of this table is shown you a return on investment in a payback period. So when you purchase the lighting, how long will it take to pay back the cost? And you can see that replacing, excuse me, fluorescent tube takes a little over 3 years. But if you replace an old incandescent bulb with an LED bulb, it only takes 0.2 of a year. It takes half a year to replace one of those olden style energy saving bulbs with an LED bulb. Just half a year, and all of a sudden you're making savings in your costs. One of the big ones is these external lights that we often have, sometimes called flood lighting or security lighting. They reduce running costs by 83% when you change them over to an LED. It makes a huge difference to your lighting costs. Lighting's an easy one you can do yourself. Then bits you can't do yourself, get an electrician in to look at how lighting is controlled. Are there areas of your building that aren't used very often that you can have sensors in to reduce the costs? Toilets are a classic for this. Why do we need toilet lights on all day long? So there are all sorts of different types of controls that you can get. Your electrician can talk you through those. And when you get these slides, you can have a read through what's on here for more information. Next case study then. Okay, this is Shop Griffiths in Penygroes, about 6 miles outside of Caernarfon, just up the hill from where I am now. Shop Griffiths, this community group came together to purchase an old ironmonger's building, which is that pebble dash building you can see with the scaffolding on in this image. And they turned this into a cafe and a repair cafe and accommodation for tourism when it comes in. Then they bought the outbuilding at the back, which you can see the taller building, the top left there, and the long outbuilding with the solar panels on, which is now a media centre for young people to come in and do all sorts of cool stuff, music and heaps of things. And now they've bought the tall building at the back on the left, the other pebble dash building called Cynnydd, and they're turning that into amazing working space and shared space and all sorts of cool stuff. And we've been helping them do all this in an energy efficient way. And a few years back, they received some money from the lottery and the climate boost funding, and we helped them put these solar panels on the media centre and a battery in. Those solar panels and that battery then helps to run the cafe and has reduced their cost dramatically. We've also helped them with stacks of other efficiency measures like I've been talking about here today. They're well insulated. They've looked at secondary glazing. They have just installed a heat pump in Cynnydd. They have electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging there as well. Shop Griffiths is amazing. So what about renewable energy then? Well, we said this is getting towards the end of our energy hierarchy. When you get towards thinking about how could solar panels work for you? So this is a map on the right of the pub that I was telling you about, Tinllan. We looked at what options do we have to put solar panels on the pub building. So you can see some of those in blue on the building. There wasn't much options really, and it's such a pretty building, and being grade listed might create some issues with planning. But we do have some land at the back that you can see shaded yellow and blue as well. And we thought, could we put solar panels there? And that's what we've decided to do. So we'll have what's called a landed array of solar panels. It won't actually look like the one on the left there, which is pipes we've got there. We're going to keep ours quite low so that they don't affect our neighbours. at all, but they'll be in that blue section in the kind of west, I guess you could call, of the image on your right-hand side, about 30 kilowatts. And we expect that they will then help us to run the pub for much less than if we had to keep paying electricity. We will also have renewable heating sources in there, and of course it's all LED lighting already. And the great thing about these solar panels is that our funders will pay for them. So we're doing renovation works at the moment. So when we're putting in our capital bid for renovation works, we will ask for money to install these solar panels. So in essence, we get them for nothing, and then they save us stacks of money. And when we save money and in our business, then we don't have to think about how do we make more money to pay for that. So, you know, we're working hard to make a business sustainable and successful here. And we all know that pub businesses have been going out of business for years now. So it's hard work. So one way we can do that is by reducing costs. And we'll do that with these solar panels. Now, don't fall for the trick, though, of thinking your solar panels will run your air source or your ground source heat pump for you all the time, and one will cancel the other one out. Because, of course, as you can see in the left-hand side, these are the months of the year. And the yellow section is when the solar panels are producing energy, and the blue section is when we're using energy. So we can see that January, February, March, the amount of energy we're using starts to drop down as we get towards summer. And then, of course, as we head back into the colder months, October, November, December, we start using more electricity again. Meanwhile, the yellow, the solar panels, they don't produce as much electricity in those cold months, and they start producing more in the summer months. So unfortunately, we can't at the minute make a battery that will store that energy that we get in the summer to use in the winter. So it will reduce the costs, of course, in the winter, but not as drastically as it does in the summer. On the right-hand side, it kind of sets this out for you in some ways. So let me just talk through this. If you look at the light green shaded section called offset units, that runs across the three separate scenarios we have here, that means how much of the electricity being produced by your solar panels are you using in your building. And then when you go to the bottom ones, simple payback years, you can see that the amount of years it takes to pay back this particular installation here, which was quite a small installation, reduces dramatically depending on how much of the electricity you use in your building. So the take-home message here is understand how much electricity you use in your building. Have your supplier of solar panels match the size of your installation of solar panels to the amount of electricity you use, so that when the solar panels are producing electricity, you can use it and therefore pay back the money quicker if you have to pay for it. And I'll remind you again, if you're doing applications for capital works on your building, then include these kinds of energy efficiency and renewable energy initiatives in it, because funders are now willing to pay for them. They weren't in the past when there was the feed-in tariff and things. They are now. Cool. I've gone really quickly, and I'll come through towards the end here to say, so these are the areas of things to look at. So we started with monitoring and targeting, because what you don't measure, you can't manage. We looked at the building fabric, the roof, your insulation space, how are your doors and windows, are there any drafts? We looked at your heating and hot water, particularly we looked at renewable heating very quickly. We didn't talk so much about heating controls and hot water, but these are other things that you may want to look into. Lighting, excuse me, lighting, LED, and the controls for lighting so that they work automatically. You might also like to look at what kind of electric equipment you have in the building, and ensure that you're only buying the most efficient electrical equipment, and asking questions about when are they on and when are they off. If you're on a pub like us, how does your cellar work? What is your catering refrigeration like? And then other more tricky things like ventilation, extraction, pumping of things. What about your office and auxiliary equipment? Does it all get shut down overnight? We talked about our renewable energies options with solar PV. I didn't talk about small wind or hydro, etc., because they don't really go with buildings. They're standalone stuff. Would happen elsewhere, but I'm happy to answer questions about that. And you might also like to think about your costs of water. There's talk about water costs increasing dramatically in the coming year. So how do you use water in your building? Are you measuring it? Are your toilets got dual flush in them? Are your taps and showers all aerated taps, so they use much less? And do you collect rainwater? Might that help you as well? So that's my presentation, very fast, on community buildings and trying to survive the cost of living crisis. And I look forward to having some questions from you soon.
Thank you, Grant. Really good. I mean, I love this sort of stuff. I'm also a bit of a spreadsheet nerd. The office I'm in now, the garage next door has got a sensor light, and that wasn't really energy efficiency. It's just because they hadn't measured it right and there wasn't room for a light switch. But it is definitely more efficient, because I would definitely leave that light on if I, wouldn't have that sensor. So very interesting. Does anyone have any questions? You can either, if you can't speak, pop them in the chat, or happy to have any hands up. I can't actually see the hands because I've now lost the screen with everyone on. Any shout outs? Because as I say, I think I can't see you.
There are no hands that I can see.
Okay, thank you, Aelwydydd.
I haven't got a question, Mark, but just wanted to say I found that really useful. Thanks, Grant. Really helpful things for lots of our community groups to consider and to put into place. So yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I will ask a question in terms of, so you said about the sort of the payback of the things like ground source heat pumps and those sort of things. When people are doing grant applications and those sort of things, does that need to be something that's considered in those applications? Will funders look at things that can be paid back quicker?
Well, the funders aren't generally concerned about payback periods because they're not expecting to get paid back. But what that does show is how efficient it is and how much savings you will make. And they're very interested in that because, as I was saying in the presentation, if you can reduce your costs, then you make your business more sustainable, don't you? And funders are very interested in sustainability, and they're very interested now in carbon savings and the road to net zero. So if we could talk about the reasons that we want to make these changes is to ensure that we're being more green, and that we're sustaining our business by reducing our costs, then funders are normally very happy.
Lovely. That's really good. Any other questions? Nothing else in the chat. Oh, Anna.
Sean.
Or Sean. Sean.
Okay. Yeah, as you know, Grant, I live in the middle of the national park. And do you find, I noticed a lot of the examples you were giving actually fringe the national park. And in Blaenau Ffestiniog, they're the hole in the middle of the mint. So the regulations are slightly different. When you're living in the middle of the national park, do you find there's any issues? Years ago, I used to help run a farmers cooperative. This was before all this alternative energy stuff became popular. And we looked at doing micro hydro because we had all the lands and all the rivers and everything else through the farmers. And the national park were really anti then. So I'm assuming that's all changed. But for instance, solar panels on old buildings, how do you find the national park in relation to that?
They have changed a lot, particularly around solar panels, far more happy. And solar panels have developed much better, so they're less of an impact visually, which is sometimes what they're worried about. And we've learned more about them. They don't create glare. People always talk about glare from solar panels, but the purpose of the solar panel is to absorb the sun, not to bounce it off. They're bouncing off, they're not doing their job. When it comes to hydro schemes, there are lots of complications environmentally, ecologically around hydro schemes. We have to be careful about where they're installed and need to ensure that we do the right kind of surveys to make sure they're done. But of course, the park now have their own hydro schemes as well, in Plastena Bulk, for example. So we can call them out on that.
Yeah.
We need to show. They also just for you, and I'm not sure if there's anybody else here based up our way at Mae'r, but they do have a fund open at the moment for community organisations based in the park. Sian, sorry, I don't have a link to it, but I did see something recently. I don't think it's been advertised hugely well, but they do have that fund in case of Helsh and Capelcurig.
Yeah. They're usually tiny amounts. They use most of it to fund their offices. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Diolch. Well, Sian. Diolch. Hello, Anna.
Anna, do you want to ask your question? You've got your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, for some reason my video doesn't seem to be working. I was just, Grant, you were saying that a lot of grant giving organisations look quite favourably now on renewable energies or solar panel installation, things like that. I've struggled actually to find grant, funders that seem that keen. I'm just wondering if you have any in mind, or from your experience of working with other groups that people have had success with. Are you thinking primarily of the lottery, or are there others?
Yeah, the lottery has been fantastic. I think where sometimes people fall down and are searching for, you're putting in Google grant funding for solar panels, and I think then you struggle a little bit. But yeah, the lottery and the heritage lottery have been fantastic. There are others about, and I can't quite find any in my mind at the moment, that are also keen on sustainability. Generally, you would be making an application for more than just the solar panels, is my thinking, or more than just the heating system. So, there's we've just been doing a lot of work with some of the sorry, dwi eisiau siarad Cymraeg efo ti, mae'n really anodd I deud yn Saesneg rwan. It's really hard to speak in English when I'm used to speaking to people in Gwynedd and stuff in Welsh.
Yeah, dwi'n
Cronfeydd turbine I gwynt, the wind turbine funds that get used in a bit further east from us, for example, and we've been working with Cadwyn Cloyd as another example of an organisation that's very good at finding funding for community organisations, and we've been delivering energy audits on these kind of reports that I was flashing before, about that then provides evidence for community organisations to present to their funders in a kind of holistic manner.
Yeah, okay. Okay, diolch.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Grant, for I appreciate it's very difficult to remember words when you're used to delivering those words in a different language. I do. Yeah, appreciate you giving us the time, the English for it. Okay, so I think that's probably a good time to end. If there are any more questions for Grant, obviously pop them in the chat, and I'm sure he can answer them as we go on. I will just try and share my screen. I'm going to try and be fancy pants and make sure that you just see the next slide, but I'm not sure I can do that really. That should have worked. I think you should be able to see. So next up, I'm introducing Peter. I will just unpin Grant and then make Peter, who is on Janet's iPad, but I promise you it is Peter, for our main speaker. I will now stop sharing and try and share his PowerPoint. And Peter is from one of the Invest Local communities. So Building Community Trust, who I work for, they support the Invest Local communities across Wales. There's 13 of them. Peter is from Hubberston and Hakin. He'll be talking about Hubberston and Hakin Community Centre and the work that they've done there in terms of the taking over the community centre. Now you should all be able to see the PowerPoint presentation. Larry, just let me know, does it look like a presentation or are you looking at the actual thing itself?
You haven't got it as an actual presentation.
Oh, come on, Mark. Sorry, everyone. We'll get there, I promise. I promise you, I'll get there. Not sure that's worked either. I can just see.
No, that's the same as before.
Oh, good. Just bear with me a second. Apologies for my technical ineptitude.
May I offer help, Mark?
Yes, please do, Grant.
I think you're about 3/4 of the way across the ribbon at the top. It says use presenter view. If you take that tick off, you might find it works a little bit better. Yeah. So it says monitors. Yeah, to your right. There. Take that tick off.
Oh, okay.
Then,
right. That worked?
No.
It's because I've got several monitors and I can't work out how to get the right bit of this. Tell you what, Peter, you just start talking and I will work out a way of getting this so it looks correct for you.
Okay, thanks very much, Mark. As I say, my name is Peter Llewellyn. I'm trustee at Hubbardston and Hakin Community Centre, which is, for those of you not familiar with the area, is on the west tip of Pembrokeshire, part of the bigger town, the larger town of Milford Haven. And I, like Grant, sort of quite happy to answer any questions in Welsh as well, if need be. And it was nice, really, having seen Grant's presentation, is how many cross-cutting themes there are in what we've done in Hubbardston, which is probably a case study in itself, and the way that we've actually taken forward a lot of initiatives to make the building, a very old building, much more sustainable for the local community. So can I have the first slide?
You can't see this slide now?
No.
Sorry. Bear with me 1 second. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Ideal. There we go.
There we go. Okay. Just a bit of background about Hubbardston and Hakin Community Centre. The first building on that site was actually in 1928 when they built a memorial hall for the local residents who were lost during the First World War. And going back to 2011, it was under threat of closure then because the local authority, Pembrokeshire County Council, thought it was too expensive to run and its usage didn't merit the investment they were making into the community centre. However, even in 2015, there was a paper that went to our cabinet in the local authority and they were going to close the centre. But thankfully, we had local county councillors who were very proactive in actually advocating that we should not do so. And as a result then, we became a trustee charity registered with the Charity Commission in August 2016 as a charitable incorporated organisation. That was key really in taking forward a lot of work that we've actually been able to do since 2016, but more latterly in the last 3 years. As far as the driving change plan and the work of BCT in the area, it was identified by the local community as a top priority, that it should stay, it should become a resource for the local community of Hubbardston and Hakin. And through a community asset transfer, it came over to us in July 2018, and the local authority then allowed us to manage it as a community resource. It is volunteer-led. We have no paid employees. We have 6 trustees who work as volunteers, but we have got a volunteer base which is encouraging now, actually being increased in terms of a lot more volunteers coming on board, because the centre as it stands at the moment is busy almost 7 days a week in terms of providing local services for the local community. The next slide. 3 key areas really in terms of how we've been running the community centre. Really, it's about collaboration and partnership, and very much so with the help of BCT in the early stages. We did receive some funding to actually keep the centre going, while we actually looked at a number of initiatives to make sure that it became a citizen-centred community centre. For those of you not familiar with the area, we've got a population of around 7,500 people living in the Hubbardston and Hakin areas. Lots of social deprivation, and child poverty is at 33% as opposed to the national 26%. So we've got our problems. Although Pembrokeshire is seen as a tourist destination for a lot of people, we do, like every other community across Wales, have pockets of a real deprivation, and the community centres become a hub really to try and address some of those issues. So the resource centre, as we see it, it provides activities to look at the sort of well-being of local residents, demographic evidence, as I've said, issues around poor mental health, long-term illness and substance misuse. So most of our activities, what we do, we host activities provided by others, although we do manage some of the activities ourselves. So many of those, as you'll see, I've actually sent out a sheet of all the activities that are actually ongoing at the moment, which might well be circulated wider afield in terms of what we're doing at the moment. And we've maintained and increased those activities. And although we've had a great deal of success, COVID did hit us, obviously, with regards to the closure. Our income was reduced dramatically during that period, but we're not alone in those issues. But the old issues that of an old building, which had been built onto sort of by each generation really, was added on sort of by the local authorities onto the Memorial Hall, gave us a lot of problems. And those are the issues that we needed to address really to make it sustainable in the longer term and to make sure that the local community could afford to use the facilities and for us to host it to them. So the next slide, please. So historically, what we had, and this was going back to 2019, was that our utility cost for the building, a sizable building, was around £7,500 per annum. We had a building survey done previous to that, which actually highlighted that there were some real issues in terms of the efficiency of an old building. And the key to us was really being signposted to the Sustainable Communities Wales in February 2020. I think Grant actually showed you a report that's actually been fundamental in the way that we've worked. And it was the BCT officer at the time that actually showed us, introduced us to Sustainable Communities Wales. And their resource efficiency report, published with sort of a number of recommendations, gave us an action plan really, that really actually told us these are the things you need to do if you're going to survive as a community centre, and in terms of reducing your main utility costs. Utility aid also played a part in actually looking at getting us the providers for our electricity and gas. Unfortunately, and particularly the way things have panned, we've got a fixed term tariff now, which takes us up to the end of 2023, which has not given us any additional cost pressures. If we had gone otherwise, if we'd have stayed with our provider at the time, we might well have been sort of on a much more variable tariff, which obviously would have been incurred costs. We also had the issues that around the old building, that the roof, a flat roof of some 300 square metres really, was in need of repair, and it had never been insulated. So that itself was just sort of leaking out costs at a rate of knots really. And we have also sort of worked with the local authority on the roof project, and they thankfully let us use their procurement methods to ensure that there were no costs to the centre during the procurement and tendering exercise. I'll come back to that a little bit later on. The next slide. So these are the type of building improvements we've actually sort of done since 2018. We needed to be an accessible centre. The disabled access wasn't fit for purpose. So we managed to get the ramped access tarmacked and made much more easy for people with mobility issues to get into the centre. We also developed an outside play area for the preschool play group. We have about 50 children who attend over 10 sessions a week. And in the winter months, they weren't able to go outside and play simply because there was a grassed area, and with our sort of weather, they were never allowed out to play because it was so muddy. So now we've got a much more friendly surface now, tarmac type play surface for them to play on. And the play group, which has been the backbone of the centre for a number of years, they've now also, thanks to BCT funding, got their own dedicated toilets, which obviously makes a huge difference to them, to us in terms of efficiency, in terms of water usage, but certainly in terms of the way the centre now, the playgroup is totally a bespoke facility, which is obviously independent. And then coming back to some of the issues that were in our action plan, we had a very old industrial boiler, which was very costly in terms of its running. We actually got funding from another source to make sure that we had that. And the key to that was as well, we put in zonal temperature controls, because traditionally, if you came into the centre and you switched the heating on, the whole building would be sort of turned on, and we were using gas at a rate of knots, really. Now we've got zonal temperature controls, we'll actually just be able to heat the areas that we're actually using at the time. And that's made a huge dent in our costs in terms of gas. PV solar panels, we've got a very large south-facing roof, which obviously we were able to put on 33 PV solar panels. And we were very pleased that the results, since they've been in now just for over 15 months, is making a huge dent in our electricity costs. And as Grant was saying, one of the key areas really, we changed all our lighting to LED. We engaged with the third sector organisation, Albert and Beth, who actually did all our fitting for us and provided a lot of the materials. We had toilets. If you switched the toilets on in the morning, the lights in the toilets, they were left on all day. So now we've got PIR lighting, which has made a huge practical difference to the way that we operate, really. And new hot water boilers as well, in terms of water costs, taps, cisterns, white goods, urinals, etc., were replaced and made more efficient. And that's made a huge difference, again, to our costs. We've just recently completed the purchase of a solar battery storage unit, which means now that all the solar energy that's generated during the day can be stored, and then as we're open in the evenings, we're now able to use that stored solar energy, and that again to bring down costs quite considerably. And it's important really, we've only just recently completed our full refurbishment of our toilets, which again is actually sort of made a huge difference to our usage, because people tend to judge a community facility by the standard of their your toilets, which are now public toilets, because there's no public toilets in the area. Whilst the centre is open, the general public, including walkers, visitors, the local population, are able to use our public toilets. One thing I did forget as well, we actually put in a new CCTV system as well during that time. So we made a number of building improvements, really, not least for save on resources, but certainly in terms of cutting down on vandalism, etc. So the next slide. In terms of funding, our main sponsors obviously has come through the Invest Local BCT route. But we've also actually sort of been very proactive in looking at funding from other sources. The Enhancing Pembrokeshire Fund was a fund, obviously, which was gleaned from the extra charges made on council tax on second homes, etc., which has been made available to the community. So we accessed 25,000 from there. That actually paid for our solar panels and our gas boiler and the zonal temperature controls. And we supplemented that with small grants from local organisations, the Port of Milford Haven Community Fund, the Bluestone Community Fund, again, only £2,000 each time, but they were all made up into making a collaborative approach to some of meeting the cost. South Hook LNG have been very supportive. And through our Community Voluntary Council, I think the County Voluntary Group, Pembrokeshire Association of Voluntary Services, they've been sort of key in us identifying what funding routes there were available together with the WCVA. So the Supporting Community Action Fund we've accessed, the Changemakers Fund, because we're in the close proximity of a local railway station, we managed to get funding, and Community Foundation Wales have also been there in terms of small amounts of money which have made up match funding targets. And the most recent is working with, we're obviously part of a national park. We've worked very closely with Pembrokeshire Coast National Park, and they have actually funded our battery storage, our PV solar battery storage facility, which they were happy to support in terms of climate change and obviously making those environmental improvements. So in terms of the next slide, efficiencies, we've reduced our utility costs considerably, 41% in reduction in electricity, 43% reduction in gas, and 12% reduction in our current water costs. There's been an update. We've just completed our annual report for the Charities Commission on our annual accounts. Our utilities cost for last year, when you compared it, was 7,500 back in 2019. For last year was £3,295. So it's come down more than those percentage costs. Our fixed term tariff has certainly helped because we've not been penalised in any way for having a variable type tariff. And we've recently completed the installation of the flat roof to realise further savings during the winter months. And we've already found a difference in terms of the utility usage above our coffee bar and our sort of vibrant play group, really. So the main efficiency, though, is that we are still very cheap for local organisations and local residents to hire our facilities and for us to host anything stemming from children's birthday parties, local groups coming in. We've got so many activities now, we're having to sort of turn people away because we're practically full 6.5 days of the week, which makes our sort of income very sustainable in the longer term. We've gained tremendously from being very efficient in terms of social media and making sure that we get the local community engaged in everything that we're doing, and we're forever consulting with that local community. And when you think of the issues now, most recently we've got warm spaces 2 mornings a week in the coffee bar. We're not getting all the people in we'd like to get in. We'd like to we don't seem to be getting as many people as we would have liked, but it's beginning to pick up. But in terms of the long-term sustainability of a facility that was due to close only 6 years ago, we're well on the way of making it sustainable in the longer term. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. That was really good. It was nice to see the crossover, I think, between what Grant was doing in sort of theory, although he's doing it in practice, but obviously the theory, and then actually seeing somewhere that is doing it in practice. And I know there's other groups here who have taken on community spaces who will be very interested in efficiency. Are there any questions from the room? Feel free to pop your hand up, either literally or metaphorically, or pop it in the chat. Nothing coming in at the moment. In terms of, because I was looking at some of the stuff in your presentation, and in terms of getting things like grant funding, obviously you've gone to a lot of different places there. Have you found it's been easier to get it from some sources than others?
I think the sort of Pembrokeshire Association of Voluntary Services have been very sort of helpful in actually identifying small funding routes. And I think what you find is that most of the applications for the groups I've mentioned, the smaller grants, are very similar. So they're very sort of quite straightforward in making those applications because they're structured in very much a similar kind of way. But no, I think we've got sort of some big businesses locally as well who are sort of very supportive. And I think the background of some of us trustees has been from a commissioning element when we were working, and I think that's helped us really gain a sort of a foothold in knowing how to apply for funds. We've also had the resilience fund during COVID, etc. So we've exhausted all routes really, but we're in a good place at the moment because we're starting to build up sufficient reserves that if, you know, obviously BCT aren't going to be around forever, and they have helped us considerably with running costs. But we're on a sustainable path, and I think in the longer term we're in a good place.
Lovely stuff. As if by magic, Vanessa, you're from PAVS, so you just had a lovely name drop. Question?
I wasn't expecting that. Thanks. I was just wondering, Peter, you said that the your electricity tariff is likely to go up in December. What sort of plans are the trustees making for that? And do you envisage sort of having to increase higher charges, or what are your plans?
No, at the moment, obviously, we're obviously looking at further efficiencies to try and make up for anything that does come through in November, really, at the end of the day, because we're almost by November going to be pretty sustainable in terms of electricity, for example, because we're now beginning to glean the benefit of the battery storage unit, which means that obviously at the moment, before we had that, we had to import electricity in the evenings. Now we won't have to do that because there'll be sufficient storage capacity to make sure that those evenings are also run through the solar panels. I think we have to plan really that we don't really want to put up the costs of the higher of the two main areas we've got, which is a memorial hall, which is well used, and obviously the coffee bar. But we're very competitive at the moment in terms of what we charge. We only charge £10 an hour for the memorial hall, which can take a lot of people, and likewise only £7 an hour for the coffee bar. But we will have to, as trustees, sit down and see exactly what kind of deal we're going to get with our current provider. And obviously, I'll be going back, knocking on the door of utility aid again, because they were so helpful 18 months to 2 years ago in identifying the key provider who were able to provide us with a fixed tariff, really. But yeah, we have to look at that, but it'd be a last resort to actually make our community centre too expensive for the local community.
Well, like I said, it's worth that investment in those batteries.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter. Really good. Any other questions? Pop them in the chat. I'm sure Peter will be more than happy to answer anything else that comes up in there. So we're going to move on and have, let's say, 10 minutes in some breakout rooms. If you are able to participate, that's great. I'll probably make 2 rooms to give there'll be enough people in there to have a chat. Larry, I'm sure right now is beavering away and popping. There we are. I'll tell you what, it's like she can read my mind. Those are the questions we're looking to answer in the breakout rooms. As I say, if you're able to contribute, that would be great. I will just go about creating them. If you can't go to a breakout room, I'm happy for you to hang around in here, where I'll be milling around, probably talking to my dog. But otherwise, pop in the breakout rooms. We should have someone from BCT in each if we need to do any sort of facilitation. And it would be great if someone could just report back what you've been talking about in those rooms. So I'm going to pop you across now. As I say, you'll come back in about 10 minutes time. We can have a little chat and then we'll finish up for the day. So I'll send you across now. I love the fact that you used all your times, all the time. Like usually what happens is you see people come back before the end of the breakout room. You obviously all had a lot to say. So that's good. So let me just go back to the discussion slide. From group 1, I've already forgotten which groups you're all in. So the group that has an era in it, is there any feedback, anything that came out of the questions?
Yeah, so we were just started talking about some of the challenges and just talking about actually some of the commonality of some of the older buildings, potentially listed buildings where you struggle to be able to make those improvements and not very efficient. Yeah, so some of those challenges, and then that obviously has greater running costs. And I think Malcolm was sharing very specifically that their building, although there might be money for a project to be able to access, but just for a support of running costs, there's very little out there. So obviously struggling to sort of find that kind of support to cover those costs. Yes, we also said that challenges of some of those small committees that hold the key and obviously sometimes not thinking that sort of forward thinking way to try and make those changes in their communities. Also the fatigue of some of these local small groups, just crisis after crisis, what next? but some of the positives, some of the things that people are doing, for example, making things to sell, making extra money. So looking at what they're good at and what they're able to do, going out to bazaars, selling goods or getting bookings in, and, you know, thinking like a business. How some groups have also taken advantage of the funding, you know, due because of COVID and the possibility to make improvements to their buildings. But that obviously still continues with the struggle of running costs. And one of the other things we said was how actually due to COVID and having to really change the way we work, some of these groups have actually had to change the way they do things, willing to try new things. So lots of learning and hopefully some of it for the better. Please, guys, if I've missed anything, I'm just trying to read through all my notes. So if I've missed anything, please do sort of step in and input. No?
Thank you, Zanira. I really, actually, the listed building things is probably something that we could look to explore in like future shared learning events, and perhaps Grant can talk to us, you know, again in the future, a while in the future. Grant, we're not looking for you every week, but because having done it, it sounds like it's something that we need to consider closely. So yeah, really good. I've written it down. The other group. So if you weren't in a group with Zanira, if there was someone who would be happy to feedback, that would be lovely.
Yeah, that's me. I got volunteered. So the challenges, obviously, the kind of ones we keep talking about them, the costs, cost of heating, cost of maintenance, struggling with sustainability of buildings, relying on lots of volunteer support, but also we hear of lots of clubs that are shutting down because they can't afford the operational costs of running buildings. So that was kind of our first question. Secondly, what support do you feel you need? Well, again, it's funding, money, but not just that. There was a lot of talk about information, knowing what funding pots are available. We have about one community centre that's run as a sustainable community centre for years, but due to the increase in the energy costs, are struggling, and so having to look for funding again when they've been running sustainably is a challenge. But yeah, not just about info, not just about training, but more sessions like this for and rolled out to more villages and more community centres. Anything else? I think, yeah, and yeah, looking for funders that are kind of looking at the bigger picture as well, not just focusing on the community centre, but integrating it with other services for the community. And we ran out of time and didn't get to the last question, but if I forgot anything, anyone wants to chip in, feel free.
Go on, Grant.
I'm just reflecting really here. It's not that Ben forgot anything because he covered it really well, but I'm reflecting on the questions about funding as well. And, you know, there's a broader point, I think, about the need to be lobbying our governments, both in St. Stephan, in Westminster and in Cardiff as well, because not only are we lobbying them for money to install energy efficiency measures in people's houses, but it should also be in community buildings as well. This is all about the road to net zero as well. So I think we have, you know, a real opportunity there to try and convince them that perhaps they should be spending less money on subsidising North Sea oil and gas, and a little bit more on insulating houses.
Thank you, Grant. That is, I think, a very pertinent point, and a good link, actually. I'll plug CMC again. That is an organisation that BCT is a part of, along with several organisations, North, South, East and West. And certainly if it became a policy priority for CMC, then it's the sort of thing that as a community organisation, a community-led organisation, there would be lobbying on. I imagine Larry will already be beavering away, putting links in the chat for CMC. And
already done it, Mark.
She's already done it. She's already steps ahead of me. So as we're drawing to the end of the session, I'll run through the final bits. As I say, I've talked about CMC. Please, if there are any questions about that, I'm happy for you to send me an email. You should have my email, I think, from or send it to the info@bct.wales. My name's Mark Faulkner, so mine's mark.faulkner@bct.wales. Thank you to our two speakers, who have really did a brilliant job at talking about community energy and the real changes that have been made in communities very recently to make them both more sustainable for the future, but also better for the planet, which is really important. I'd like to thank everyone else who's attended. I think it's been really a really good session, and I'm really grateful that you've spoken in your breakout rooms and come up with some great contributions. The support available that I talked about earlier, the links were in the chat. We will send it out again in the future, around the next few days. There will be more cost of living events, I imagine, coming soon. We're just finalising our calendar, so they'll be open for both Invest Local and other groups. And I think that is it. So thank you for coming. As I say, we'll circulate the email with the links that we sent out, the one that Grant put in right at the top, which is all about community energy as well. And we'll make sure to invite you to any future events about community buildings. And if you have enjoyed it, I'm glad you've been here. And if there's any other questions or any feedback or anything, feel free to send it over, and I'll look to pass it around to either the speakers or just take it on board myself if that's who it's for. So yeah, thank you for coming, and see you all soon.